What are all the things you need to know about artificial intelligence? That's what we're going to cover here in episode 199 of Transformation Ground Control.
Welcome to Transformation Ground Control. Ground Control. The podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation. This podcast features technology agnostic and international discussions related to digital strategy, software selection, implementation, change management, business process optimization, and everything else you need to know to make your digital transformation project successful. Whether you're embarking on an ERP implementation, supply chain transformation, or any other business or digital transformation, this podcast is for you. Now, here's your host, Eric Kimberling.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Ground control to make it fun.
Hello, welcome to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 199. My name is Eric Kimberling, here with Darian Chwialkowski. Darian, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here, and thanks for joining us. We've got a great episode planned today. We're going to cover all the stuff related to artificial intelligence, everything you need to know. We're going to get into basically the top segments, interview segments that we've done in this podcast throughout the year that have been related to artificial intelligence. We're going to do a little compilation here and play the best of some of the interviews we've had over the course of the year related to AI. We'll get into some newsworthy topics related to AI, and we're going to start off here today with some social media questions. But real quickly, before we jump in, a couple logistical things. First of all, this is the podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation. It's tech agnostic, it's independent, it's unaffiliated with all the software vendors and technology providers in the marketplace. So you can rest assured that we'll provide an objective view of the world today. And today we're going to focus on AI. The show is produced by Major Tom Productions and sponsored by Third Stage Consulting. So thanks for being here today. And Third Stage Consulting, by the way, is an independent and tech agnostic consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journey. And that is the company that I'm the CEO of as well. So again, thanks for being here. And before we jump into our top AI segments of the year so far, Darian, what are some of the questions we've received on social media?
Yeah, this first one is good. It says, do you need engineering background or programming background for a career in digital transformation?
Great question. Absolutely not. I don't really I have a little bit of a technical background from really early in my career. I did a few week certification on configuring a certain ERP system. But I don't think it's a prerequisite. I think there is some value, though. I will say, even though you could focus on project management or change management, even process improvement, there's all these different aspects of digital transformation that you could focus on that don't require deep coding or development experience. But if you do have any technical background, even if you don't plan to stick with it or specialize in the technical side of things, there still is value in it. I know for me personally, when I learned how to configure a certain ERP system, it's not so much that I was good at configuring. It's just that I understood how the systems worked better. I understood the guts of the technology a little bit better. And so it helped me when I would go do change management stuff or process improvement stuff, or even just talking about systems in general. To this day, I think I just have a different perspective having done some of that technical stuff in addition to all the non-technical stuff. So, on one hand, I say, no, you don't need it, but it can't hurt to understand how the technology works and to have some technical depth behind that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. Our next one today is, why does phase 0 take place after software selection rather than before it?
It doesn't always. I mean, sometimes clients will do phase 0 after selection. And the reason for that is, let me back up first, and I'll tell you the perfect world scenario, and then I'll talk about the real world scenario, a common real world scenario. So in the perfect world, if you can do phase 0 before selection, that, in my opinion, is ideal, because that's where you make sure you get all your team aligned. You have a clear vision of what you want your business processes to look like in the future. You have a clear understanding of the why you're going through the project and what you expect to get out of it. You can start to get project governance in place and you get the team mobilized. And so there's a lot of stuff in phase 0 that adds a tremendous amount of value that makes the selection process easier and more effective. However, having said that, what happens in reality is that organizations don't have enough of a budget to do all of phase 0 before they select the software, because there's no project yet. Oftentimes teams will get approval just to go through an evaluation process to choose technology. And then once the technology is chosen, that's where they come up with the estimate for the proposed cost and time and all that stuff. And then the board or the executive team will then approve that project to go forward. And then they've got the budget released to now to be able to do a phase zero. So that's sort of the internal organizational dynamics that oftentimes sort of water down that ideal perfect world scenario that I described. But I would say if you have the luxury of doing it and you have budget available, you're going to save a lot of time and money by doing phase zero earlier in the process than later. And if you're going to do it anyway, you might as well do it before the selection, because that's going to make the selection go a lot more smoothly. And it's going to ensure that you are a lot more likely to choose software that's the best fit for your organization. And you'll just have a better sense of who it is you are and who it is you're trying to become. And you'll go in with your eyes wide open versus kind of going a bit more cold into the selection process.
Yeah, absolutely. Some great questions today, but I'm excited to switch gears for basically the rest of this podcast into some different AI, starting with the AI newsworthy topics.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear what you've got here for that topic.
So this first one is about the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. They released a new framework to ensure that AI is deployed safely in critical infrastructure like energy and water systems. It addresses risks such as attacks on AI, misuse, and design flaws with input from industry, government, and civil society. Analysts see it as a necessary step given AI's growing role, but adoption continues to remain a challenge due to misaligned priorities and voluntary compliance. While some praise its potential to level the playing field, others argues it could have built more existing guidelines like NIST framework. This is just the first step to shaping a secure AI use for critical services like energy and water systems. So to dive a little bit further in on this, Eric, how do you think the DHS framework will influence AI adoption in critical infrastructure? And is it enough to address all of the risks that are involved with AI?
That's a good question. I don't know, to be honest. I mean, I'm hearing this for the first time as far as a newsworthy topic. I wasn't aware of it, but I would think that having a framework and a standard that people could refer to, especially within government or infrastructure types of organizations, I would think that would make adoption a little bit easier, and give you some direction on how to go about that process. I just wonder, is the DHS, is that the right agency to be defining that or not? I don't know. And I guess the question becomes should there be more of a global standard too? I assume that's just for, just in the US, is that where that's originating from? Is just the standards for the U.S. based infrastructure?
Yeah, it's just a voluntary framework that they're laying out.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's good because I definitely don't think it can hurt. I think if anything, it can only help because I think people are having so much trouble understanding or getting their heads around how they could be using AI within their organizations, and if that's a way to do it, to make it a little bit easier to test the waters, I think it's a great move.
Yeah, definitely. One other thing too, I think is big with AI is how effective do you think that AI Safety and Security Board will be bridging the gap between public and private sectors in securing AI?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on what you mean by securing AI. I worry when I hear that word and I think of the government getting involved. I think about censorship or biases that the government may have, or in the name of wanting to protect people from AI, they might, try too hard or overreach on wanting to control information and control what AI can and can't do. I know that I don't know if this is directly answer your question, but I think it's a good topic because it doesn't matter what my opinion is necessarily. I think it's more important to identify what the trade-offs are, the kind of the dilemmas are with it. And I think one of them is, for example, if you look at OpenAI, the way OpenAI was set up, I was actually listening to a podcast about this, and I don't remember which podcast it was, but they talk about how OpenAI was formed and how it caught on and how it, the Microsoft involvement and all that stuff. And what's really interesting about how OpenAI was first set up, which is, for those that don't know, that's the company that provides the AI behind ChatGPT, as well as other products out there. Some Microsoft products as well are using it. But before Microsoft, or as Microsoft was getting involved, I don't know the timing of this, but as Microsoft was getting involved in investing in OpenAI, they decided that OpenAI would be a for-profit company, but that there would be a sort of a governance over it that would be more for social impact, like making sure that it was safe and responsible and that sort of thing. And I think it could create a sort of a conflict between the profit motive and wanting to let it be open and free and whatever. But then you've had this overarching governance board that was also responsible for ensuring that people didn't misuse AI. And while I'm all for that, I mean, you don't want AI to be misused or overly relied upon as fact or whatever. There's a fine line between that and then the government coming in and saying, well, and I don't agree with whatever. There's biases that can affect that. So I think that's the big question I would have. So I don't have a good answer for you other than to say I think there's that dilemma. I think is going to probably be something that doesn't get resolved anytime soon, but it's going to be kind of a pendulum swinging back and forth and tensions on both sides of that argument.
So yes, I totally agree with that point. And given that this framework is voluntary, I think we definitely will see how this develops in the future, and if it does develop into something that is more strict and not voluntary to companies. But how do you see that? I know you talked about it a little bit, but how do you see that developing in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best way to get adoption or to get people to get on board with the framework would be to, first of all, to do a pilot, like kind of a use case of it. And if they're not already, I would pick a company or pick a part of an organization to use the framework so that they can kind of point to that as an example and illustrate for people how the framework would be applied. So I think if you could do that to make it a little bit more real rather than just a hypothetical or academic sort of framework, that would help. And maybe they're already doing it. I don't know. But that would be the key there. And also just educating people of like what the framework is and how it could possibly help their organizations and, what the value is of it. It's really just selling it and marketing it, I think is another big thing.
Yeah, for sure. And this is obviously for critical infrastructure, like we said, for energy and water systems. But to relate it back to just different companies outside of those industries, how do you think that other companies can take this framework and maybe use it in their company or ensure that they are have AI secure or AI deployment that is done well within their organization?
First of all, providing the resources and the commitment from executives, just like you would any other IT project. You'd want to make sure that the executives are on board, they're committed, they're involved. And then also giving the teams leeway to experiment and innovate, because there is no, unlike a lot of back office systems like ERP systems or supply chain systems or CRM or whatever, unlike those types of systems that are fairly mature and well established, and you kind of know how you can be using those types of systems to improve your business. AI is just sort of like a wide open blue ocean of opportunity that can be overwhelming, because you don't even know where to start a lot of the times. So I think that's one of the big things is just, letting people test and innovate and try things. And then when something works and then you strike gold and you find a really good use case or something that seems like you could add a lot of value through this testing and innovation, then you could say, okay, let's double down on that. And now let's start to scale it across the organization and start to spread it. And then, you start to get wins behind you. Then you can start getting more creative and you start thinking outside the box in terms of how else could we be using AI and improving our processes. So it's really like a really fun exercise of continuous improvement and which has been around forever, total quality management, continuous improvement, that whole Japanese movement of TQM from the 80s or whenever it was, 70s or 80s, that continued into the 2000s. I mean, that's really the spirit behind it, is this constant innovation, constant improvement, constantly measuring and tweaking and pushing and finding new ways of doing stuff. It's sort of like taking that approach and now you're adding this really cool technology that can help you fast track that approach.
Yeah, it's definitely super exciting. But to go to our next newsworthy topic, this one is a very interesting take on generative AI. So this article examines how generative AI, while promising to boost efficiency, can often generate some more work instead of saving it. Here are some ways or examples of that. Increased administrative work. So employees that use AI-enabled free time for routine tasks rather than strategic or high-value activities. Content overload. Gen AI enables faster content creation, but this can lead to a flood of low-quality material, making it harder to find valuable insights that will actually be recognized or do well on socials. Attention fragmentation. AI can handle multiple tasks, but this creates pressure to manage too many projects almost at the same time for one employee, leading to either poor decisions because they're making too many decisions at once because they can do more projects at once now, or burnout. Another couple ways: increased communication, where there is faster email drafting leads to higher email volumes, which obviously then people are having to respond to a lot more emails if there's a lot of faster emails coming out and responding to you. So faster time responses. And then also some other ones in urgency triggers, unnecessary projects, maybe just overwhelming employees with projects that wouldn't have been done without AI. And then fear of missing out. So companies taking on too much AI or rapid AI advancements too fast. And these tools sometimes don't have proper alignment with the goals of the company, and that can then lead to, like we've talked about before, not good situations within a company just because they were afraid of missing out on this technology. So I want to dive a little bit deeper into this because I don't think we've talked about this side of, yes, there's a lot of great things that AI can do for us, and we use AI in a lot of ways in that way as well. But what are some ways that maybe are causing too much overload of information and it's maybe hurting the company more than it is helping? So Eric, with this, how do you think companies can strike a balance between using Gen AI to increase efficiency and avoid the unintended consequences of creating more work for their employees?
That's an interesting perspective. I hadn't heard that before, but it makes sense on one hand, but on the other hand, it makes me wonder if maybe that's less of an issue of AI creating too much work or creating additional work, and maybe more of an issue of not having your organization designed the right way, or work designed in the right way. And so I think, AI, any sort of disruptive technology like AI that has the ability to totally transform and change the way someone's doing their job, you have to make sure you're really revisiting their work. So if they were doing, like, if it, there's sort of a person that's a jack of all trades and they dabble in a bunch of different things throughout the organization, and then you give them AI and now all of a sudden they're doing tons more projects within each of those areas, I could see how that would quickly get overwhelming, with just too much to keep track of, and too much overload. But if you're if you're a highly specialized person, and let's just say, for example, you're a person you're an engineer, and one of your jobs, or one of the things you have to do as part of being a product developer, someone that designs products as part of your engineering role. Let's just say you're starting to use AI for more of that. You're using AI to create CAD drawing, or to, create CAD drawings, or product designs, or converting a CAD drawing into a product master within a ERP system, for example. Those are things that you have to do as part of your job. But if I can do that faster and I can do more of them, it should, in theory, if I'm a specialized job, I should just be able to have more throughput and be able to handle a higher volume. But I guess you'd have to also look at, though, even in those cases, are there cases where if I can go from, designing or managing 50 products a year, and now I can do 75 or 100 or whatever, is that too much, even with the right tool sets and even with the efficiency gains and all the other stuff? And what are the, downside consequences of me now, doubling my throughput or whatever? So I think it's case by case. You have to look at the jobs, but I think it's just a reminder that the technology is great, but you also have to make sure you're optimizing the people and the process behind the technology as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So you kind of started talking about this, but how can companies then implement AI in a way that avoids this explosion of unnecessary projects or initiatives for their employees?
Well, I think, like I said before, if you just sort of test it on a small scale to start. So like in my product design example, if I've got, 100 people in a department that are doing this job, I might pick one person and say, let's work with that one person to really test out this process and see how the tool might be used, and see what's working, what's not working, and then try to fine tune what that process looks like, what the job would need to evolve into, and ultimately how you would use technology to do that job. Then once you sort of fine tune it, then you can start to roll it out to other people. But I think just working with someone who's actually doing the job that you're trying to impact or influence with AI, you want to try that out with them on a small scale and then ramp it up on a broader scale over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like I mentioned before, I think FOMO is a huge part of AI. But how can leaders resist the pressure to adopt a new AI tool every time something comes out, which we know is very often, and instead focus on strategic alignment with organizational goals and go and add AI from there?
Well, I think you want to start just, and I'd answer this question the same, by the way, for any technology. So you can insert AI here, you could insert any other technology, and I'd say just let the business drive the business needs and the business priorities and the strategic goals and objectives of the company. Let that drive how you're going to use AI or any other technology, rather than just saying, hey, we need to become an AI driven company. Now, if for some reason that there are industries where it's going to be tremendously valuable to say, AI is going to disrupt our business, and we need to be more embracing of AI, that's okay too. It can come from the top and sort of be pushed down the organization. But when you do that, though, you want to make sure that you're using AI and you're not just jumping headfirst all in on it. You're sort of cherry picking the things that are going to add the most value or that are the most important to your business in a way that you think AI can help.
So as I talked about earlier, we know with content overload, high quality content really has gotten overloaded, and maybe some low quality content has been put out as well. So what are the best practices that you recommend for maintaining high enterprise knowledge in content?
Well, I think that, you bring up a couple points. One is the content overload, and the variability or the variation in quality is a big deal. So, the question is, becomes how do you manage that and mitigate that risk? I'd say that, first of all, it underscores the importance of having human involvement. I mean, you still have to have people that are sort of keeping an eye on that sort of stuff, and you can't just defer entirely to AI and assume it's just going to crank out good stuff. So that's number one, is make sure you have humans involved. And then second of all, just being selective about where you use AI. I mean, just because it's there doesn't mean you should just create a ton of garbage content, because it just doesn't do you any good. However, there probably is going to be a lot of garbage content being created by others. So you've got to figure out, how do you stand out above that, or make sure your content doesn't get confused with theirs, especially if you're in marketing or whatever. So those are a couple of things that come to mind for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree. I think that if you put out a lot of content, like you said, you could probably break a 10-minute video into 5 different clips, but it doesn't mean that all 5 of those clips have really high value content that are going to perform well. And you almost drown out the one video that is actually has a lot of value for people. And so that was a really interesting perspective, something that I don't think we've talked about on here before, and one I didn't consider before reading this article. So it was interesting to dive into that different perspective with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, really interesting stuff. I wasn't aware of that either. And it's a good segue, or a good lead into our top AI interviews of the year. So we're going to, we sort of curated some clips from all of our AI conversations over the course of the year. And as you know, if you listen to this podcast, we cover AI a lot, but we cover a lot of other things too. So for those of you that are total AI nerds or what's the word? Aficionados. I don't know, whatever that word is. There's certain words I just don't know or ever use, and I should probably not use the podcast as a way to first use them. But anyway, for those of you interested in AI, how about that? We'll have this whole episode dedicated to you because we're going to focus on AI and some of the best interviews we've had over the course of the year. So stick around. We'll be right back. We'll get into that countdown of the top discussions, and we'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
I'm excited to announce the release of our 2025 Digital Transformation Report. It's available now on the Third Stage Consulting website, www.thirdstage-consulting.com. This report gives you an unbiased, technology-agnostic insight to help you optimize your organization's projects for success. Get your copy today using the QR code in front of me or on our website.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry. engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So, collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S/4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Hello, welcome back to episode 199 of Transformation Ground Control. This is the Best of AI episode. Glad to have you here today. We're talking about all things related to artificial intelligence here today. In fact, we're getting to the point of the podcast now where for the rest of the podcast, we are going to play you a curation of some of the best clips of interviews we've had in this podcast throughout the year that's been focused on AI. We're going to focus on those conversations that really delved into the world of AI. So glad to have you here, and we're excited to get into this. So I'm going to hand it off to you, Darian, and let you describe and introduce each of the clips as well as what episode it's from. And if people want to go watch the full episode, they can always go listen to the full interview. But we'll play little clips, substantial clips, but not the entire clip of each of these interviews. So I'll turn it over to you, Darian.
Our first clip today is going to be from an interview with Ryder. This is from episode 167, and the topic is AI's impact on operations and people. Let's roll out the clip.
You know, when you have a proven mature technology like a new ERP system, for example, you know, that's where, you know, getting things right and carefully configuring and building the system before you deploy it, because it's somewhat predictable. I mean, more so than AI, that, you know, you might have a different approach with ERP systems, but with AI, it's probably better just to, like you said, start small, just get some use cases built and some momentum built within your organization. And I love what you said about leaders too. You know, leaders have to not only state the why, you know, why are we doing this? And if we're not going to lay people off, then say it. We are not going to reduce headcount. We are not going to eliminate jobs. But the question then becomes, well, if you're not going to eliminate jobs and you're going to make me more efficient, I'm smart enough to know that something's going to change and I don't know what it is. You know, and so how do you see leaders struggle with that? Like, instead of me saying, Lauren, I'm going to automate 30% of your time now because you're going to use AI to make your job easier. I mean, you probably want to know, well, what am I going to do with that 30% of my time then if I free up that capacity? You know,
well, I have seen it done really well, where, and I think it stems from the fact that leaders seem to be really scared to share numbers. Like a lot of them just, I don't know why, cloak and dagger stuff. Whereas where I've seen it done really well is when they say, okay, here's our numbers. Here's what we're making. Here's what we want to make. Here's our goal. We're going to put this automation in place. We're going to be growing. And therefore, with that extra 30%, we're going to need you to do more work, right? But better work. And that's how we're going to do it. And so it's to hit targets, sales targets or revenue targets or margin, whatever targets you're looking for. But it's about that openness from leadership. And I think that, as I said, I think sometimes leaders are kind of scared of being wrong. Like, oh, if we put the wrong numbers out, what are they going to think? But actually what we find is the employees actually just like being part of it and knowing that, you know, we're part of something and let's all go on this together, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it makes total sense. And what's interesting is the audience is commenting here on some things related to AI. Amin on YouTube says, I'm in Zagreb, and here in Croatia, it's not used a lot. So Croatia may be one of those Eastern European countries that's not as excited about AI or not as quick to adapt. Another interesting comment, a follow-up question here from Demelade. I'm probably mispronouncing your name. I'm so sorry. This is on YouTube. AI is now getting a lot of adoption in application development with developers. This adoption is likely to filter through to application users such as ERP analysts and implementations with time. And
yeah, absolutely. But developers are using it in the background for sure. I've heard lots and lots of great stories and examples of that. But yeah, it does need to filter back into the business. And I think, being able to showcase what you're doing and how you're getting there, it will help with that kind of cultural adoption piece within the organization to go, actually, if this is helping you, it might be able to help me.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so development, AI for copywriting of all sorts. This is from William on YouTube, GPT Playground and Perplexity. I use it a lot for copywriting myself, which I love because I love to write, but I love not writing, but still writing even more than I love writing.
I love outlines.
Yes, exactly. I like
I know what I want to say.
Exactly.
Someone just do the hard work for me.
Right, exactly. It's pretty amazing, I'll be honest, how far it's come, and just in the last year or two, it's come so far in terms of its ability to create based on your own ideas. I take a lot of my YouTube video transcripts and I use that to create written documents, which ChatGPT is really good at.
Yeah.
This is interesting. You were talking about Saudi Arabia earlier. This is from Abo from YouTube. And Abo says, in Saudi Arabia, we're planning to be a hub for AI between East and West because of AI consuming a lot of energy, which we have, and our government supports this approach. So super interesting. I never heard that, never thought of that.
It is. And actually, I went to the LEAP conference. Abo, you probably were there as well. I think everybody, like, it was about 200,000 people went to that conference in Saudi Arabia back just a couple months ago or last month. And it was huge. And there was an entire pavilion dedicated to startups. Someone I was with counted, there was about 600 little, when they got all the little booths one by one all lined up. I think he was counting, it was about 90-something% of them had AI in their name or on their wall. There is so much investment in Saudi Arabia in this area right now. So absolutely. And the data consumption is a huge challenge for the rest of the world, well, for everyone really. But it's great that Saudi can support that.
Yeah, and you look at Dubai and Saudi Arabia and some of the Middle Eastern countries that have historically relied on energy. They still have energy, but it's interesting is they're investing so heavily in technology and other economies to try and diversify and prepare for the day when there's not as much oil and there's not as much energy available in the region. So I think that's super interesting that they're embracing AI in that way. Here's a comment from Keith on LinkedIn. Keith says, I'm seeing private AI being applied in due diligence in vendor selection and performance monitoring. Private AI allows companies to apply semantic ontology and proprietary data sets across large organizations.
That you're absolutely right, Keith. And one area I've seen a lot of private AI coming through is in the legal industry. There's, so for example, you've got 600 pages of discovery that you have to read through and classify everything and put them into, as I say, data sets and figure out what we do with it. And so lawyers are feeding in hundreds and hundreds of pages, getting really useful information back, and then asking the AI to say, okay, well, what are some arguments that I could take to court for this, right? And so now the fact is, particularly in the legal industry where, you have to get it right, we can't rely on the AI, I'm sure you heard the case back a few months ago when the lawyer got disbarred, I think, in the US for just referring to cases that didn't actually exist when their ChatGPT went rogue. But actually putting it within your organization and actually, absolutely programming it so that it makes sense, as you say, with your own proprietary information. Absolutely. And that actually does lend itself to, there is a big discussion about AI ethics and what we can and should be putting into our AI and so, knowing that we're putting it safely in our organization and not sharing, for example, customer data or health data outside. So there's a lot of value in that private AI.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like if you or I were to take our client list, let's just say, not that we'd ever do this, we take our client list and we put it into OpenAI and ask it to create a graph that shows the logos of all of our clients. Does that client information now exist in the AI model that anyone could access? So I could go in and say, show me all of Lauren's clients, and it would be able to spit that back because it learned from me when I entered it. Is that, or learned from you when you entered it?
I'm not sure. I don't think it's that exact, but yeah, basically once information is in there, it can be accessed. And I think it's just knowing that, I mean, and that's part of the education piece for employees, what you can and can't, and what you should and shouldn't be putting into your AI.
Yeah. Super confidential IP type stuff. You probably don't want to start.
Yeah, data privacy, cybersecurity, all of those all get wrapped up in this conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
The next clip we are playing for you guys today is a panel of 6 vendors from episode 168. And the topic is how ERP vendors are using AI. Let's roll out the clip.
To what extent and what ways can AI enable ERP systems to increase productivity? And let's start with you, Rick.
Yeah, awesome. Rick from Infor. So not to be repetitive with some of the other companies here, obviously we're all covering similar areas, but Infor covers anywhere from industry specific, from healthcare to discrete manufacturing, process manufacturing, you name it. Covering both SMB with a pretty big presence there, as well as a pretty big presence in the enterprise space as well. Infor is maybe a little bit different in that our industry specificity was built from the ground up in the ERP engines themselves. So we have several that are purpose fit for that. We've got one centralized hub, though, in our cloud platform that ties them all together and creates what we call the cloud suite. And the reason I bring that up, that's the main area of coverage for me. So I run product management primarily on that main centralized cloud hub. So integration, data management, AI, our new generative AI offerings all kind of come there together because we're trying to abstract that level of innovation so that we can do it a little bit more quickly. So obviously when we're talking about systems productivity, it's near and dear to my heart because it's something that we're always looking at. Because ERP, at the end of the day, is a collection of business process, right? They're not necessarily all that different. Some can do them a little bit differently based on industry or micro verticals. But if you take something like order to cash, for instance, that all of us are familiar with, it's a subsequent steps of all these different things that if you're applying artificial intelligence, whether it be from an experience point of view, like Karen was talking about, or if it's back in automation using AI and some sort of API flow behind the scenes, you're inherently speeding up that system. We used to talk about companies being able to pivot all the time, right? Whenever COVID happens, what happens? But we're going into this world of like self-adjusting and self-healing systems. So that sort of productivity is something that we're heavily investing in and we're seeing because we're lucky to be able to see it across multiple applications. But it also goes to the level of when you're building these types of things, whether it's a new in-context experience for sales recommendations or part recommendations or asset intelligence, whatever it might be. The ability to build those things, obviously we all know Gen AI is this huge game changer that you don't have to know code. You don't have to necessarily have as deep of a data science background because it's opening up the world to be able to create this sort of intelligent content so much faster that's getting injected directly back into the ERP experience, the end user experience, which at the end of the day means a better customer experience, which I believe we're probably going to get into. But yeah, it's an exciting space that I'm really excited for and happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very exciting. How about you, Raj? We haven't heard from you yet, but what are your thoughts on how AI is enabling productivity?
Yeah, no, thanks, Eric. Look, I think that the panelists here have captured a lot of these things, but I think there's one important dimension that we should think about when it comes to AI. And that is nothing to do with technology, but it is to do with generational knowledge transfer. What do I mean by that? Think about what's happening in the manufacturing sector today. By the way, I'm with Rootstock, and Rootstock is focused on the manufacturing sector. We're the number one ERP on the Salesforce platform, but the youngest of my siblings here on the call, right? So clearly that's where we're coming from. What we're looking at is an entire new generation is coming into the workplace right now. And manufacturing as a sector, is skewing demographically towards a lot of the knowledge and experience actually exiting the workforce very soon, right? I mean, we are looking at a lot of gray hair, more than mine, but they're already retiring right now. They're coming to that age. So what do we do, right, from an AI standpoint to make sure that this experience, which is so valuable, is not lost? So we're looking at AI as a way to capture the learnings from that, generation and transfer it seamlessly to the younger workforce that's coming in. And everything that we end up doing, whether it's predictive investment, generative investments, is a way to accomplish that. Essentially, think about this. It's the training wheels that we need to provide to help adopt it. And I believe it's incumbent on all of us here on this call to not to hype up this technology more, but to really look for practical usages, especially for conservative, risk-averse industries who are already sick and tired of the hype. They don't know what to do with it. I can't run my business on generative AI. I'm sorry, right? It's a portion of this problem that we have to solve. But I think we have over-indexed so much on the hype that we're forgetting what the practical reality is.
Yeah.
That's kind of my take on this.
That's really well said. I think that, just being more practical about it, what exactly is it to our organization? How are we going to use it? Even just educating, why is everything we do in the transactional side of things, why is that important to AI, and how does that affect AI and that sort of thing? So you're right. There's a big human component that we've got to work on here, rather than, I think we're getting past the hype now. Okay, we all get it. AI is a big deal. We're all excited about it. Now, what does it mean? I think that's where we're at right now, is let's understand what it means. And I appreciate you guys are doing a nice job helping us understand that. And then last but not least, the last guest we haven't heard from yet is Jeff. So Jeff, I'll let you introduce yourself and answer that question too, if you don't mind.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Thanks for having me. So I'm representing SAP. I'm with Cognitus. We're one of the SAP Gold partners. SAP is run on a network of partners, thus me being one of those. So I've been doing the SAP implementations and different things for about 15 years. So I'm one of the managing directors at Cognitus. So today, really focused on, obviously love to be with the peers here, not enemies, frenemies. How about that? We all make each other better, Gen AI, et cetera. All these types of things we talk about is really fun. So and pertaining to the question, about the productivity boosts and things, with the recent implementations we're doing, you can't do it without AI. Any of the demos that we're giving, right, as this team on board here, if you don't use the word AI, you're not going forward, right? So I think about 20 to 40%, depending on the different area that you're talking about. So, like Rick even said, with the faster processing times, we see that across the board. Whether you're talking about efficiency or accuracy, that happens all over the place. One of the biggest ones we've seen, especially in the SAP space, people think of that as kind of a large ocean. I got to memorize these T codes and things like that. That's a thing of the past. You have these chat bots and different things. Even when you go to your bank, right, you log in, you get a chat bot that pops up. A lot of those are in our ERPs now. So when you go in, let's show me my open AR on this customer. You can do that really quickly. And that improves the speed of folks that don't log in every day, or shop floor users that want to see what warehouse tasks do I need to pick on my outbounds this morning. Things like that are really quick to their fingertips, right? On the scanners even. And also, just getting all of those decisions to their fingertips as far as predictive analytics, the data volume sets that come in from the customer demand and all those types of things. But that's kind of those practical examples that I like to think of. Raj, like you said, how can we be practical about it? How do we understand Gen AI and those types of things? Even OCR, that's always been around for 15, 20 years now. But the learning language models behind it, how do we actually understand those documents and make sure that we can make them better when the customers send those in on a quotation side or a vendor on the invoice side, whatever that looks like. So that'll be my take.
Yeah, well said. A lot of the fundamental foundational pieces of AI have been around for a while. It's just now that we're getting to it sort of in the enterprise space and trying to figure out how to bring it all together. And I love this whole conversation around how, AI is a great tool, but it's only as powerful as we make it within our organizations and as powerful as we allow our people to use it. And so a lot of that's going to be defining for people. How are we going to use AI? What does it mean to this organization? And what's that process going to look like? And I'd say there's a heavy component of organizational change management to organizational design, and really just helping define those detailed processes and how AI is going to be leveraged. Because it's not just going to do your job for you. It could do a lot of your job for you if you instruct it and if you do it right. But there's a lot of human interaction that has to go there. Last but not least, I'm going to introduce myself. I don't think I ever did. Eric Kimberling. I'm with Third Stage Consulting, and we're an independent consulting company that is not affiliated with any of these software vendors here today, or any other software vendors for that matter. And we help clients with digital strategy, software selection, and implementation support as well. So that's who I am, and thank you for allowing me to facilitate here today. And speaking of that, just a couple audience comments and questions here. This is from Ermin on LinkedIn. He says, "Thank you, Eric, for bringing all these industry leaders. Just to clarify, I did not bring these industry leaders together. It was actually TEC. It was Christian and his team at TEC that brought them all together. I'm just here. I'm just the face, the talent, or whatever you want to call it. So thanks. It's really Christian that brought it all together here. So thank you, TEC, for that. Curious, this is off script here. I just want to ask this question because it's a question I get a lot. And I think it's especially for those younger people earlier in their career that are listening right now. This is from Eamon from YouTube. Eamon says, what would be better to pursue in a career, AI or data science? I'm just going to open up to the floor here. Anyone that wants to answer that question, I'll open it to you guys.
I'll just throw out an answer here. I think right now, data science, honestly, because it's you gotta have a foundation. Here's the thing. I don't think any of us on this stream can say where AI is going to be in even 6 months. Like we have our predictions. We know that it's moving really quickly and it's going to only continue to rapidly iterate. But the thing about data science is it's a really good foundation that's going to help you in terms of AI. So I always say, particularly when talking to like finance individuals too, data science, statistics, some of these things that are like the baseline part of this, I think provide a really good foundation. So that's my opinion. And, I think, there's lots of things you gotta make sure you educate yourself on AI. Everybody in the industry does. But as far as a career goes, I think getting that foundation data science is going to only help. That's my perspective.
I'll provide another view of that. It kind of depends on the field in which you want to pursue a career. So I would imagine a data science career is going to be more along the lines of building with the data science, helping, the C-suite navigate data science types of decisions. If you pursue a career in AI, I'm in product management and I get to build with AI and, chart the strategy for AI and think through solving really tough customer problems, and then work with data scientists and those who have specialized in AI, to bring that to life as a solution for an organization to solve their problems. You could also, I'm sure, pursue a career of marketing, being able to translate, to normal language, what it means to work with AI and to build with AI and the value that it can create. So my recommendation would be to think through the field in which you want to pursue, and then that might help you decide AI or data science.
Just to add to what Kerry said, right? The choice is, do you want to buy or sell the cake, or do you want to be a baker? That's the choice. Mm-hmm. They both are related to each other.
I like the way you put that better, though.
Yeah, that is well said. Very well said. And I appreciate you guys saying this too, because I have a son who's looking at colleges, and I've been trying to convince him that he should major or minor in data science. He wants to do business, and he's like, yeah, I'm not a computer guy. And I said, yeah, you don't have to be, it doesn't matter. You need data science is a great skill to have no matter what field you go into. So totally agree with you guys. I think that's a good feedback.
And as far as I see, there are different skills to be a data scientist or an AI architect solution. And of course, because most of us are coming from the product or from the marketing, so we will probably be more with AI or any other architecture solution, and not by the data scientist, which is more R&D technology part.
Right. Now here's the first bit of AI humor that we're getting here today. This is from Patricia on LinkedIn. She says, woman on the phone says, my husband accidentally swallowed an aspirin. What should I do now? Give him a headache, says the doctor. So her question here, which sort of leads into her question here, which is how do you avoid unnecessary AI solutions? I guess that's maybe more of a general question, is like, how much of this that you guys are seeing so far, how much of it is, call it necessary or, really valuable versus something that's more pie in the sky, nice to have sort of thing. I'm curious to hear what you guys think about this, because I think we're sort of dancing around that exact question.
I think it's a little bit different in the enterprise software space than what we see in like even some of these examples, which are hilarious. But the use of filters, and you talk to AWS or any other Google vendor out there, Azure, and they tell you leave it open to different types of models for different scenarios. So I think we're anticipating that we're going to know the exact way to take all this stuff out. The more that you can make it personalized, that comes with a certain cost model, right? But the more that you can apply filters to make sure that you're filtering out all that noise and getting to the right answer, the better. But I can understand the question, but you've got to be a little bit more careful, obviously, in the enterprise space than just going out into hitting the open market.
Right. Yeah. And just some other comments from the audience. William on YouTube says, my wife has her PhD in what is essentially data science. The opportunities are many. And this is from Syed from YouTube. Is AI is to help ERP bring data, document communication, and knowledge in a single database so customers can get actionable data. And I assume he means employees can get actionable data as well. So great stuff there. This is I'm just getting to some of these really interesting comments from the audience too, because I think this adds some color to what we're chatting about here. But this is from Shmuel on LinkedIn. Shmuel says AI should assist the CEO in understanding how the organization is running, highlighting the major problems such as cash flow issues, etc. Now the CEO is not using the ERP system, but if you will, the entire organization will use it too. So that's a really interesting point. If you can get the executive team on board with the benefits and the value of AI, and they actually start relying more on their ERP system rather than just relying on a report that someone manipulated out of Excel or whatever. I think that's a great opportunity for people to really embrace it.
My name is Eric Kimberling, and I'm the CEO and founder of Third Stage Consulting. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to invite you to learn a little bit more about Third Stage Consulting, who we are and what we do. I've included a link to a video right here that describes Third Stage in a bit more detail. It talks about our story, our history, our philosophy, our clients, our service offerings, and that sort of thing. But in general, what Third Stage Consulting does is we're an independent and tech-agnostic consulting provider. We help clients through their entire digital transformation life cycles, beginning with digital strategy, software evaluation and selection, all the way through and including implementation planning, implementation readiness, and the actual implementation itself. We're technology agnostic, so we only represent our clients' best interests. We do not represent software vendors. But having said that, we work very closely with software vendors, all the leading players that you can imagine we've worked with, both in helping clients evaluate and select them, but also in helping clients implement those solutions as well. So we have a very broad, objective, agnostic view of the market that is meant to really represent your interest as you go through your digital transformation. I also encourage you to scan this QR code right here to get access to our resource center. This resource center has a ton of information, a ton of ebooks that are free. You have access to top 10 software rankings, playbooks for how to make your project more successful, guides to change management, YouTube videos, all kinds of stuff that are going to help you through your digital transformation. So I encourage you to scan this QR code to get access to those resources. And please feel free to reach out to me directly to brainstorm ideas about your project. Even if it's just informally, you want to bounce around some ideas and get some informal advice, I'd be happy to spend some time with you. So feel free to reach out to me. I've included my contact information below. You can also find it in the description field of this video as well.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
This next topic was definitely a good one. It was with Izabela Lundberg, and it was episode 173. The topic was managing resistance to change in an AI-driven world. Let's roll out this clip.
He says, how far are we at to build AI-powered change management tools? All communications are diversified promptly according to multicultural organizations, people acknowledgements embarked with change waves significantly, and assessments as well. So he's curious to know, is there anything that that AI could do maybe to enable better change management? Do you see the tools potentially being used to address this human factor that we're talking about?
I love that question. Actually, it can definitely help with carving specific, obviously, outputs as well, expedite communication, additional details, the training, etc., so that really can be tailored to specific departments of organization or overall across the whole organization. So I definitely do see tremendous intersection and opportunity, and I love that side of it where you actually can bring the data and proper analytics, leveraging also the tool and speed of how you can craft and also execute and implement. But in the same time, now with that speed, it shouldn't be issue anymore that we're lacking of information or lacking of communication or keeping other unknown. But we should not be also leaning fully just on that as well, right? So as long as we serve this as and see this as a tool, we're leveraging with also obviously effective tactics to overcome resistance and effective ways to still engage with people and then have that human touch and personalized ways of how we interact. We're going to be able to then generate tremendous success. But can that expedite, make it more effective, better? Absolutely. I'm totally geeking on right now, testing a couple of different AI platforms and or startups that are really exponentially going to be serving organizations in months and years to come. And it's just wonderful to see that. But then again, without inclusive communication, engagement, and participation by humans with humans, no matter what tool we have under sun will not get us where we really want to.
How do you think advancing and emerging technologies that continue to exponentially increase in value and just change in general, how do you think that fast pace of technology change that's accelerating, how do you think that's going to affect people's willingness to change, their tolerance for change, their change fatigue? How do you think change management as a discipline gets affected or impacted by these emerging technologies like AI now and in the future as they tend to change faster than humans typically do? What are your thoughts there?
This is really like a catch-22, right? On one hand, we have a great, amazing tool that can do exponentially well, that can also give us outputs and vast information. But ultimately, what we wanted to do is simplify and distill and be able to do a micro, as we're looking and striving for more micro learning on a consistent basis. The same thing we should approach with that. We want to do micro change, right? Change that's going to stick, not just something that we can do in snap in 1 second, but also something that we can truly call it's being transformational because we committed to it and we know that is not going to create additional pressure, because obviously with everything else that is speeding up and that creates tremendous pressure already with huge overload and already fatigued, as you mentioned, workforce. So we have opportunity to really look at things from multiple different perspectives. So for example, how is this affecting in willingness for change? For me, what I'm finding to be really fundamentally different is enhancing willingness to change itself, right? How can you do that? We can focus that we can say that we can have a lot of more efficiency. We can make things more simplified for you as a result of, and when it's that perception of that efficiency and puts people at ease, right? So it's also empowerment when people feel like, oh my God, I have a choice and I have this particular set of tools. I have this particular tools that I really feel very comfortable that I had a chance to test drive, and also that I really feel like it's going to enhance what I'm doing on day-to-day basis. This is great, right? So from that perspective, we'll look at some things that what can I automate, for example, what I can also have done quicker, faster, so that I can focus on this area, which cause maybe I don't have enough time, or maybe I feel already overworked, right? So when you have these little trade-offs, when you see that, oh, actually this is going to help me, is going to make a huge difference, right? Then also when you look at things from cultural alignment, as I mentioned around, it's like, how is this going to culturally align with technology? So if you're claiming that we're also fast growing startup or one of the top Fortune 500 companies that is technology enabling a new technology, we have to really first see within ourselves, internal within our organization, before we can really prescribe that or demonstrate or deliver to the client, right? So it's very important to really allow that and say culturally how this fits, and then have a people to culturally align with that. But with increase of change, to answer that second point you, Eric, were asking, obviously these complexities and learning curves can be very challenging for so many, right? So again, as I mentioned earlier, micro learning, it's a great avenue when you really feel like, oh, I just got this concept. Oh my goodness, this is amazing. Then you automatically desire and want more, right? Because it feels good. It's like, oh my God, I'm not overwhelmed, or I don't feel like I'm done because I can't keep up with it, or I feel like I'm behind. All of a sudden you start feeling with these incremental 1% daily changes that accumulate to something amazing. And when you take away the fear of losing job from people, right, or lack of trust in technology, those are also elements that I really see great fit for that. So when you know that your job actually will not be eliminated, but it's going to just create more effectiveness and more engagement and more quality, then really start making a huge shift. And obviously, I see some also amazing strategies that we can really encourage to reduce that resistance and increase that adaptation.
That's a perfect segue into my next question, which was going to be, how do you, and you've alluded to some of this. I mean, you've talked about micro learning, you've talked about, you just mentioned culture and how culture can be kind of an enabler to getting people to get used to change and accept change and be excited about it. But what are some of the most effective strategies you've seen organizations use to overcome some of this resistance to change that we've talked about?
Obviously, everybody wants to mitigate that resistance and then encourage that adoption. And first comes from that level of transparency from leadership. It's like, okay, how do we do more inclusive planning and implementation, right? Why we have to do it? How is this going to affect existence of organization or impact of everything else related to organization? So when we have more of those dialogues and more of the opportunity to do these planning sessions where everybody's get to be heard or have a chance to ask questions and feel included, that level of inclusion itself strengthens sense of belonging, strengthens sense of desire to really then do more, right? Obviously, effective training and support, because a lot of times, how many times, Eric, I mean, from your expertise in ERP implementations at such a large scale across the world, how many people were getting the tool, but they never felt afterwards that they had a support and in a way that is being comprehensive and ways that it's conducive for their learning. And we know how adults learn the best, right? It's not just the theoretical, it's that a practical application. And then also opportunity to really eliminate people's fears associated with the new technologies. And then also be able to really feel that capabilities on mastering these tools, it's possible. And then be able to demonstrate that. It's like, oh, this is easy, let me show you. You know, that interaction that puts people in ease right now, I think it's fundamentally major game changer. But what we're seeing, that personally what I'm seeing that is huge shift is the transparent communication. If we don't have the level of transparency where we can regularly communicate, either as in short-term impacts, long-term impacts, seeing where we're at, or have some visual to see the progress. You know, like a car, when you go and drive a car with a full tank of gas, it's like, okay, we started on empty, we're slowly increasing, we're now filling up, you know, or when you also start with the speed, we're on the 0, and now we're going to drive this amazing Ferrari 350 miles, fantastic. But to get there, we have to start with that turning on the engine with that first 0, right? That shows, and then slowly, incrementally increase that. And when you have that foundation, then you can accelerate. And just because one department or one group or one individual is going faster, you know, that's also a great way to really get infectious desire for others. And we do not get this part very well, which is adaptability with a sense of that feedback loop, right? It's like, how do we provide the feedback in terms of where we're at right now in that gauge, how far and how quickly that speed is going to get us? Is it just about speed itself, but it's also where direction where we're going? And when you align those two things, magic happens, right?
This next clip we're going to play for you guys is from the Kate Arndt interview. This is from episode 183, and the topic was the intersection of manufacturing AI and change management. Let's roll the clip.
manufacturers have all of this equipment, right? That's producing data, whether or not they're extracting it and contextualizing it. There's a lot of data that's kind of just hanging around waiting to be used. The foundation that a lot of manufacturers want to put in place is like, if especially, let's say they have multiple facilities, they want all of their facilities with the exact same tech stack, each of them having, the same historian, the same data lakes and the same technologies. But the challenge is there is they have to evaluate their current tech stack, then eliminate some and then reintroduce some. So it's really, they're trying to create a very consistent standard across their organization. And while I can understand that and appreciate it for like certain pieces of their tech stack, I do think that is a barrier to them implementing more advanced technology sooner. And the foundation, though, I'd say if you want to implement AI, collecting the data from your equipment is like the baseline, right? Yeah. But I don't think you need to do it across your whole facility to get value right away. If you came up with like a use case, thinking, okay, this one line has a bottleneck that I'm sure about. I think it's with the pump. Maybe something's not flowing right. Maybe you want to evaluate one line against 3 others. Focus on collecting the relevant data to that use case. See if it helps solve your problem. Leverage AI for that data specifically, and then you can scale it. Versus making sure you have all the data for all the lines and then applying the AI. I think that is another thing that they could kind of expedite the process a little bit more.
Yeah. And if they could find like even if they're little tiny little use cases, if you could find some like pockets of innovation where you're trying out innovation for a little part of your business or a little part of your process. And then once you sort of fine tune it, then you can start to scale it, across the organization. It seems like that, more of an agile type of approach could be a way to do it rather than trying to take that traditional approach that you might take like with a big ERP system. You're going to, a lot of times take more of a waterfall approach where you try to define all your requirements up front and try to define your end-to-end business processes and then implement the technology. I don't think that's really how AI is going to add value. And I think the technology is changing so fast, it's just going to become outdated by the time you deploy it if you take that sort of slower approach there. Exactly. And for the manufacturers that, are very committed to that approach, I say, fine, go that route. But at the same time, there's opportunity that you can do that. If you cherry pick use cases, you'll get a lot of value there and might as well start implementing that in parallel, even if you are working on just the foundational part. But computer vision is a really good example as like, you don't need a big foundation. If you want to understand, maybe you're doing a quality check, leveraging like computer vision, you need, the hardware, and then you need, essentially you're going to be operating on the edge if you want real-time information. So there's some connectivity that's involved, and then whatever analytics platform you're using on top of that or AI platform on top of that. So the data is a very specific set of information, but it doesn't require that much foundational technology besides, what's specifically involved in that application. Gotcha. Yeah, that makes total sense. Here's a comment from Saif. It's sort of a follow-up comment or a response to Sam's question about what foundational stuff needs to be in place. But Saif has, first of all, plant machinery need to be equipped with PLC. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. Does that mean anything to you, Kate, or do you agree with that? Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's one of those things, like in the situation where, if it's a computer vision application in that very specific use case, I'm not really sure how relevant a PLC specifically is. But yeah, if you wanted, at the last company I was at, if you wanted to build a digital twin, basically you needed a historian where your data was going. So we could use that historic data in order to build that digital twin. So different Industry 4.0 technologies, if you will require different foundation. I'm just saying that there are use cases in AI that don't require as much. However, I will say
if you're not like the bare minimum is you need to be collecting data. It needs to be going somewhere, whether it's a data lake or on-prem, whether it's, a public cloud or that's pretty much a bare minimum requirement. But other than that, if you have the data going somewhere, that's the foundation, I guess, for AI.
Yeah. Now, what about the initial early signs of the impact that AI is having on sort of the human side? And that's part of what we want to talk about here today too, is the change management piece of it. I know so far we've been talking about how we can get our heads around how to use AI or how to build some of these use cases, get the foundation in place to be able to start to deploy AI, maybe even on just a limited scale. But from what limited usage of AI that most manufacturers are seeing right now, what sorts of impacts are you seeing to the human side of the equation, or how do you think AI will impact people, longer term?
So how AI will impact, so my favorite thing about it, I'll start with the positives, I guess, is safety is a really great use case, or it's a really beneficial impact of AI on humans in manufacturing settings. So where in the past you might have to go inspect something that's in a dangerous area, maybe it's very hot, or it's like, you have to kind of crawl through some sketchy crevices that might be dangerous. Now you can leverage, robotics and computer vision to go and make assessments in basically replacing the human when it comes to the physical evaluation, and also making the work environment safer. Because if you're evaluating or trying to understand how your equipment is just from a safety perspective, if you're able to do that more consistently and find trends in your data, then you're more likely to be able to prevent incidences from occurring, just like you would optimize your production. So from a human impact, I think safety is one of the best things that are going to be coming from this. Also with ergonomics, being able to automate tasks that were ergonomically unhealthy for humans, I think that will be beneficial as well. And then empowering operators who are hands-on. A lot of times they might not know exactly what to do if something's going wrong. It might be like a gut check. So empowering operators with specific information in real time, I think is, just another aid and another tool. I will say it's important to think about the actual technology that's communicating to the operators. There's an example that someone gave that they invested a lot of money in really heavy tablets. And so their entire manufacturing facility, they all got these really heavy tablets. And they didn't really talk to the operators about it to get their input before they made the purchases. And no one was using them. And they were like, well, why aren't you using them? And they got that information, that feedback. So I think it's really important on both sides, getting the human feedback and really incorporating everybody who is working in manufacturing settings, incorporating them in the solutions so that it does provide value to them and make their lives easier, as I would assume the intention is for most companies.
Yeah, and it's sort of, you're sort of answering this question. I'll pop it up anyway, even though I think you just sort of alluded to it or answered it. But this is from someone on LinkedIn. I don't see the name. I apologize. But it says, what are the critical challenges in implementing AI in manufacturing, and how can change management practices address these challenges to ensure a smooth transition? And sort of you give a good example there of what happens when you don't do good change management with the tablets and people weren't using them. Is there any other advice you'd have for, companies as they think about just change management strategies that, might be helpful for them?
Sure. So many stakeholders. That's one of the biggest things I'll say on both sides of the spectrum, whether I'm selling technology to a manufacturer or I'm a manufacturer and I'm trying to implement technology. I kind of mentioned this before, but in the past, manufacturing pieces of the organization in manufacturing all had their own scorecard, so to speak. They had their own goals. And if you want to implement AI effectively, then you need input from every single I guess, silo in order to make it effective from a business perspective. And starting with the business value, I think that's the other thing that manufacturers kind of are a little disconnected about sometimes, because maybe it's the technology group, like I'm part of the technology group, but if we're not thinking about the business value of implementing technology in our manufacturing facilities, then we're not aligned with our overall goals. And that can lead to digital debt, another buzzword I hear, but you're making these massive investments. And if you don't have that alignment from manufacturing and the business side of things, then, and you don't start with like a lot of intention and a use case, then it could lead to that. And I think that's another piece of it. I think the upfront planning is really important. And when I say that, I mean upfront planning in the exact use case that's going to bring you value. So my favorite way to go about that is kind of brainstorming where a use case might be most feasible. And by feasible, I mean where you have the data and where you have people that have the appetite to try something. So if you have multiple facilities, which facility is most likely to take on a technology to kind of learn about it and be the, example for others. And then they have the data, they have the resources. And then I also like to brainstorm based on the impact and the business value. And so based on those two scores, kind of ranking the use cases, and whichever one has the biggest business impact and is the most feasible, that's where I recommend starting out, and then scaling should it, provide value.
Right. Yeah. Makes total sense. We're getting a lot of good comments and questions here on and actually humorous ones too, which I always appreciate. Speaking of humorous comments, this is from Will Quinn on LinkedIn. Says, wait, leaders didn't consult with frontline employees before deploying a new tool? What? I've never heard that happen either. So I'm shocked, just as shocked as Will is to hear that. But kidding aside, that is a very real issue, obviously, with a lot of manufacturers. Here's a comment. I want to pull this up. This is getting a little, I'll forewarn you, Kate, this is getting a little outside the scope of anything that I can answer. This is way over my head because we're getting into literature and stuff here, and that's not my thing. But this is from Sam. Sam Graham on LinkedIn says, in the 19th century, Charles Babbage, he corrected it on his next comment. He said it's actually Charles Babbage developed a mechanical computer that almost worked. He reported being asked, pray, Mr. Babbage, if you put into the machine wrong figures, will the right answer come out? Is there a danger of AI generating a similar question? So in other words, if the data is bad, is that going to create problems for AI?
Yeah. Yes. That's why I call it like a data pipeline, especially if you're getting data from various sources. You need to put a lot of time and effort into that data pipeline to extract the data and contextualize it. And you need to have somebody that owns the data integrity. An example that I'm going to be stealing from one of my Industry 4.0 club team members is in her facility, for some reason, the Fahrenheit temperature data changed to Celsius all of a sudden. Totally obviously changed everything that they were getting from their AI. And that was where she realized, okay, if we're going to be implementing this stuff, there needs to be somebody who's monitoring this, because, depending on your application, it could cause a lot of problems.
Right. Yeah, totally. And you don't want to assume, well, because it's AI, it must be right, especially if you've got bad data going in there.
Well, we've all seen ChatGPT's, incorrect answers. So
yes, we have.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the first things I did when I first used ChatGPT was I entered in the prompt. I said, tell me who the leading independent digital transformation consulting firms were, because I was hoping to see Third Stage on there. It did not tell me Third Stage, but what it told me is all these other companies that are not independent. So I was like, that's not true, because those companies are affiliated with software vendors. So that I was a little jaded early on, but I think it's actually getting a lot better. But still, there's still wrong data out there that ChatGPT is drawing from in certain cases, and you just have to be aware and know that you've been disciplined about your data cleanup and your data governance and all that stuff, which has always been important. But I think manufacturers have struggled a lot with that over the years.
And that's another good point of what might be holding manufacturers back, or like the critical challenges, right? Resources. Everybody wants to implement these solutions, but I don't think they understand like the independent resources that need to be responsible for these projects. Because everybody that has the day job in a manufacturing facility, they don't have the time to take on an AI project as well. And often it requires their input, but there needs to be more people who are coming in and helping out versus like people who already have a day job, you know?
Right. I recently published my first book. It's called The Final Countdown: Strategies to Reach the Third Stage of Digital Transformation. And I wrote this book because I really wanted to find a concise way to share some of my knowledge around digital strategy and how to get started on a digital transformation journey. So in this book, I cover 3 different sections. I cover the people, process, and technology aspects of transformation, with the idea that it's meant to be a starting point, a launching pad for organizations and team members that are going through digital transformations. So I encourage you to buy this book. You can get it electronically, you can get it paperback, or you can get it in hard copy, as I'm holding here in front of you. You can get it by going to thefinalcountdown.com. You can also search for it on Amazon if you shop at Amazon. Otherwise, just go to thefinalcountdown.com. Love to hear your feedback on this book as well. So I hope you check it out and hope you enjoy.
Interested in working for a company that truly values your unique skills and experience? Here at Third Stage, we don't hire based on resumes alone. We look at the full candidate, experience, and willingness to provide excellent service for our clients. Within a technology, independent, and agnostic consulting firm, you have the opportunity to learn across industries with a diverse group of clients. Our consultants also have the opportunity to diversify their portfolio and learn across technology systems. If you're interested in joining a high-growth entrepreneurial organization, please reach out to us at work@thirdstage-consulting.com.
John Belden is our next interview we're going to play for you guys. This was from episode 189, and the topic was AI's impact on SIs and procurement. Let's roll the clip.
The big SIs and some of these larger firms that are investing heavily in generative AI. How are you? Do you see examples of where their processes are changing as a result of embedding AI in their implementation processes?
Yeah, I think, well, and I think where we're going to see it, like I said, we're going to see it in development. We're going to see it in testing. We're going to see it in training development for sure. I think where most firms are claiming that they're seeing benefits today is in the area of program and project management. And it's the ability to kind of look across all of the documentation that's being generated by the project itself and summarizing that documentation, right, and rolling that up into some sort of a digestible firm. It's not necessarily looking at the project plans in general, but the ability to look across multiple, a large program with a lot of different status reports going on and asking generative AI to do things like analyze all this information, pull out what you think is the most critical of that, surface those things, put this in the context or a form that a CIO or a CPO or a transformation officer can digest. I think they can do that a lot more rapidly now than what they could just a year ago.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense. And it's interesting hearing you talk about this because there's so many really manual processes in implementations that can be sped up or accelerated here. You talk about development, training, testing. I mean, those are 3 really big ones. Data migration,
right.
Data cleansing, like look
exactly.
for all the, remove all the duplicate records or all the, merge together all the duplicate records in this set of data. And, using AI for something like that can be pretty powerful and save a lot of time.
Yeah. And I think largely I think it's going to save a lot of time, but I don't think initially it's going to save a lot of money. Right, because the initial impact of generative AI, I think, is gonna formulate around a lot of those jobs that were taken offshore to begin with. Right. So the monetary impact associated with those is going to be small. Right now, having said that, right, I think there's also a potential for a big impact if the clients know what they're doing on reducing the costs on their side as well, not just the SI side, right? So in developing their agreements with their SI, making sure that the client can access and leverage the SI tool sets to deliver on their own accountabilities also, to me, is going to provide a terrific opportunity for clients. So when we think about the testing in general, right, most of the time the SI will say, well, the client has responsibilities for developing the test scripts, right, or the client has responsibilities of coming up with the integration strategies.
Right.
To the extent that the SI doesn't make their tool sets available to the client in order to actually execute those processes, right? The client, I think, is missing out, right? So it's one of those things where if they're in a competitive process and you're in a competitive situation, I would absolutely be pressing on how can I leverage your tool sets in order to be able to mitigate my risk as a client on delivery of this project, and where can those necessarily help me, not through your consultants actually using the tools, but allowing my people to leverage your tool sets to deliver my obligations.
Right. Makes total sense. Now, what about if we shift gears and talk about, maybe moving outside of the actual procurement process? And I know we've been talking about how to use AI potentially in implementations themselves. What about selecting a platform, like an AI platform in general, not just for the implementation, but maybe for the organization as a whole? I know you told me before this interview that you're writing a blog or a white paper on this topic.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about maybe a preview of what you're finding or what you're thinking about in that blog, and how you might address that.
Yeah. So it's been really interesting for me, because as part of it is when you're thinking about ERP packages in general, you sit there and say, okay, what are the pieces, parts of an ERP package? Well, there's the FI section, there's the procurement section, there's the there's the supply chain planning section, and those become very, very familiar, right? And so from my standpoint, it was at least beginning to understand what are the components of an AI infrastructure that I'm ultimately going to have to buy. Right. And so part of the paper just goes through and says, hey, let's just break this down to say, how can we organize this thing into categories so that when I go to compare vendors, right, I've got something that I know that I can develop, let's call it a common nomenclature that I can use when I'm comparing vendors' products. So we've broken that down into 5 general areas. There's the data management area, right, which deals with data integration, pre-processing, governance, and quality monitoring. There's a model development section, right, that says, okay, I'm going to develop models. So that's going to contain framework, libraries. How do I build custom models? How do I do automatic machine learning, et cetera? Then there's a section associated with inference and deployment, right? So now you're thinking about, how do I do real-time inferences? How do I do batch inferences? How do I serve my model, right? How do I incorporate my model into potentially a product that I'm putting out there? And what are the tool sets associated with that? Then there's, I'll call it machine learning ops and governance. And then finally, I'll call it the integration capabilities, right? How do I connect an API? How do I do data integration? How do I do interoperability? So it really is saying, okay, those are the 5 main sections. Now, how are you going to define your requirements in each one of those 5 main sections as you think about buying the products themselves? And the crux of the paper is just kind of laying that out so that we can all talk about it the same way.
Yeah. And you've also been a proponent of this phase 0 concept for AI and choosing a platform and embedding AI in your overall digital strategy longer term. Tell us a little bit about that. What should organizations be thinking about as they start to plan for or kind of go into this phase 0 of potential AI adoption?
Yeah, so phase 0 is really interesting, and I'm sure you're, whenever you're doing an ERP program, you normally do, whether you call it a phase 0 or not, right? You're normally doing something up front that you're going to refer to as a strategy, right? And that strategy is typically, how am I going to go from point A to point B, right? And point B oftentimes is reasonably defined by the market, right? It is, okay, there's a product out there, or there's a state that I want to have my organization in, right? And I want to be able to achieve that state. And that state's defined maybe by business KPIs, or some sort of profitability performance or something like that. But you can readily define it. The phase zero for generative AI, though, to me is it's a really, really interesting space to think about, because first of all, you're going to have to say, how am I going to rapidly assess across my organization where is going to be the impact of generative AI, right? I mean, it's not like I'm going to say, where am I going to apply ERP? This generative AI is so broad that figuring out what that whole landscape is going to look like and where am I going to put it, that's a really, really tough problem to solve, right? Then the second question you have to deal with is, am I going to embed generative AI in my products? Or am I just going to use it in my processes? Or am I going to try to do both? Because the technology requirements associated with embedding it in your products is fundamentally different than just keeping it in-house, right? And not exposing it to your clients itself. The third thing you got to think about that may be different than traditional phase zeros is, I've got a wide landscape of we mentioned, of where generative AI is going to have an impact. How am I going to handle the non-strategic areas, right, that I'm not going to put my IT department on, knowing, right, that everybody in the organization, that's reasonably talented is going to be trying to apply generative AI on their own, almost like end user computing was, right? Go back 20 years ago. Oh, I've got a PC. I'm going to start developing my applications. I'm going to start using generative AI. How are you as an enterprise going to control / manage, or at least harness all of that work that's going on with generative AI in your enterprise that's not strategic, right? The third or the fourth question then is, how am I going to balance, like we talked about with the systems integrators, how am I going to balance savings, right, versus accuracy, knowing that generative AI is not going to be, I'll call it foolproof. What are you going to do with your phase zero to think about that question? And how are you going to begin to embed those quality controls again? And then I think the last thing on generative AI is really fully understanding the risk profile associated with generative AI when you take on a phase zero, is becoming really familiar with those risks and understanding what the implications of those risks are on your organization.
Yeah. And speaking of risk, what are some of the risks? We think about generative AI, both in terms of our implementation and transformation itself, but also just in our usage of AI day to day in our operations. What are some of the risks that you're seeing so far?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've already talked about a couple of them. Testing is one for sure, right? It says, how are you actually going to do testing? I think market volatility is something that, in the ERP space, we don't think about market volatility anymore, right? You don't think about, is Oracle going to be around? Is SAP going to be around? You don't even think about that. But you certainly have to think about it now in this space of generative AI, right? You take a company like, OpenAI out there right now. I mean, do you know if they're going to be around 2 years from now or not, right? Is Sam Altman going to go join somebody else to do that, right? I mean, that you're seeing that all the time. You're seeing things like, I heard a new term, and I found out it wasn't a new term, but they called it acqui-hire, acqui-hiring, right? And acqui-hiring is companies, instead of doing an acquisition, right, to go out and buy some of these firms, what they're doing is they're going out to those firms and they're just hiring the top talent out of those firms, leaving the firms as kind of shell firms to die on the vine, right? And they're doing that to a certain extent to bypass regulatory things associated with antitrust. And they're saying, you know what? I don't want your IP. I don't want your software. I just want your people that dealt with that problem, because I have that problem here, and I'm going to hire the whole team to come over here and do this, right? So the firm may exist, right? But the people that were there to begin with don't exist, right? So there's all of that kind of market volatility. Then there's this, I'll call it compute uncertainty. And when you're buying these products out there today, lots of them I'll say are costed by the level of compute power that they use in order to be able to deliver the answer, or let's call it the tokens that are produced by the answer. Right? Well, what control do you have as an organization of the underlying compute intensity associated with a particular LLM? And with knowing that those new LLMs are going to come out and be embedded in products in the future, when you're signing up for your deals with these infrastructure providers, right? How do you actually control that? I'll call it and drive certainty in that compute. We already talked a little bit about regulatory compliance. I think this is going to be one of the things that drives the market in the future is regulatory compliance in general. I think the EU was first really kind of pushing out regulatory stuff on generative AI. I think you're going to see the same thing in the US, and I think you're going to see a lot of big providers in the US actually I'll call it breathe a sigh of relief when that regulatory control comes out, because it's going to slow down to a certain extent the development. They're going to have chances to recoup their investments that they've made, and it's going to act a little bit as an inhibitor of new companies coming into their space, because now the regulatory compliance hurdle is going to be there, right? So I think we're going to see it. I think the big guys are actually going to welcome it. And then the last thing I think that's a big risk is the implications associated with inaction, right? What if I don't do anything with generative AI? What's the impact if I don't move in this space? Knowing how fast things are going, knowing what a disadvantage I might be if I'm not a first mover, right? What's the implications if I don't do that, and how do I actually assess that? To me, that's a kind of the new risk profile associated with generative AI that I'm not sure a lot of companies are thinking about.
And the last clip we have for today is from a recent interview with Paige Lord. This was from episode 196, and it's all about ethics in AI. Let's roll this last clip.
I'm a single organization, and I want to take all my data and do something with it. Either I'm going to train my own AI model, or I'm going to let the cloud vendor take my data and train their cloud or their AI model. Am I giving up a significant amount of value because now I'm not getting the value of all that cloud vendor's other customer data that's also teaching the AI model? Like, in other words, is the AI model for a cloud vendor going to be more valuable because they have access to more data versus my own instance of AI?
Yeah, it could be. It really depends on the type of work that your organization is doing. And you may say, you know what, if I'm in this and I'm handing over my data and there's 1,000 other orgs that are handing over their data and it's all getting scrambled together, then I'm not really going to be worried about that. And so if you know the specifics of that, and that's okay with you and your organization, and also if you trust your cloud vendor, I should have started with that too. If you have a cloud vendor that you trust and they say, we're using this to train this model, but we're not doing anything else with your data, then I guess that is a different situation. For me personally, I tend to be a little more conservative, I would say, on the topic of data, because I think that there is a lot happening right now. Even, if you take a look at some of the lawsuits that are coming out against Perplexity right now, 3 lawsuits against them from major players who are saying, hey, you're taking our information without asking us. And that's happening a lot in the world of artificial intelligence. So I tend to be on the side of organizations should be transparent, and certainly cloud vendors should be transparent.
Yeah, especially while so much of this is still uncertain in the court systems, and the legality of it all is still, I imagine, going to take decades to really sort this out.
I think so.
Here's another question that's interesting. This is off of YouTube. This is from Dan on YouTube. It says, with so much misinformation on social media like X and TikTok, isn't AI trained on this data by definition unethical, or at least non-transparent, or perhaps biased? I'll add that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. So if artificial intelligence is being trained on this sort of public information out there in the world, could it, in theory, be, learning about misinformation and then perhaps not corrected? And I think that that's definitely a risk, especially because there are so many misinformation campaigns, which ironically are made faster and in some cases more effective because of artificial intelligence. And so, AI is being used to produce these campaigns and put the content out there very quickly. And so I do think that there is a challenge there. And this is why I always say, when it comes to artificial intelligence, you have got to ask questions about what you are interacting with. It's a rare situation that I will engage with AI, ChatGPT, for example, and not double check with my own sources the information that it shares with me, unless it's something that's like a recipe that's coming forward. So, and even then, I want to make sure that I'm I'm making whatever I'm making correctly and not just the way that ChatGPT told me to. So I do think that there is a challenge there. And to your point about, is it unethical? I think that is a really good question. I would have to think a little more about that before I made that claim that yes, this is unethical, but I will say that it is certainly risky.
What about bias, though? Maybe set aside the ethics or the ethical side of it, but just, I have a human bias. I have my opinions. I have thoughts that not everyone's going to agree with. And if that information or that opinion is shaping and teaching AI, how do you prevent that sort of bias? It kind of comes back to the first question I was asking around bias.
Yeah, I think this is why it's important for providers of the artificial intelligence to have these, what we talked about, these responsible AI systems in place so that they can constantly be testing and checking the model. That is something that has to happen on a regular basis. It shouldn't be like a one time a year or twice a year we recalibrate this model. It's something that has to be checked on a regular basis. So in terms of the bias, I do think that there is a level of risk there. And my hope would be that their responsible AI teams have a way to monitor whatever is being taken in as data for that model, that they could take a look at, is there a huge uptick in this specific conspiracy theory or this specific bit of misinformation that we're ingesting to inform this model and train this model. And I will say also that, these organizations have a lot of control over what data informs and trains their model. My hope would be that they aren't just saying, this is everything we've got, throw it in there to train it. My hope is that they would, be aware of these situations that might be a little more challenging or dubious. So.
Yeah. Now, in the U.S., for those of us that live in the U.S., we have a presidential election coming up, and it's a heated political time right now. And AI is always a source of potential controversy or at least a point of potential discussion when it comes to elections, because back to your point about, and Dan's point too on YouTube about campaigns of misinformation and biases. And, that's unfortunately what a lot of political cycles are like. It's a lot of bias. It's a lot of misinformation, conflicting information, whatever you want to call it. How are you seeing AI affect, or are you seeing AI affect things like politics and, in the U.S. and elsewhere, not just in the U.S., of course?
Yeah, I think AI is definitely having an impact, but how it's having an impact and how much of an impact it's having sort of remains to be seen. We are seeing, I think it was OpenAI and Microsoft came out not long ago saying that, and this is all public information, but they came out saying that they had uncovered some misinformation plots that were using ChatGPT, and the goal was to just be disruptive in the election. It wasn't for or against one specific party. It was just to disrupt the process of democracy in the United States. And so a lot of times these misinformation campaigns are meant to just do that, just to cause enough people to question things like what might be true, that it causes disruption. I think that some of the ways that we're seeing the use of artificial intelligence, in the election, we're seeing people create videos and create images of things that perhaps didn't happen. We saw this with a tweet, or I don't know if we're calling them tweets or X's, that went wide. That was it had to do with Taylor Swift endorsing Donald Trump, and so that was something that went wide. That was something that didn't happen, and it went broadly on social media. So we're seeing those kinds of situations. We're also seeing the use of like AI audio, for example, was used to do a voiceover of a video that it was like a spoof of, or a parody of, Kamala Harris's campaign video, using a lot of real footage from her campaign videos, and then with a voiceover of her saying a lot of things that she didn't say and would probably never say. And so, people are using AI in an effort to very quickly put out content that, tells the story that they want to tell. And I think it's ruffling a lot of feathers. I think it's definitely having an impact because it's causing people the biggest impact, I think, and I don't have the data to back this up, so take it with a grain of salt, but I think it's causing enough people to ask questions about what is real and true. So people are just like frustrated enough or confused enough that they just don't know who they would vote for. And then in some cases, you may see people who say, I'm so upset and overwhelmed by all of this that I'm not even going to vote at all.
Yeah, which is kind of the worst case outcome or worst case scenario that you'd like to see.
Yeah.
That's super interesting. What about sort of along these same lines of obviously bias and ethics is sort of the theme where we keep coming back to. But here's a great question to Lisa on LinkedIn. Lisa says, what should organizations be doing to prepare their employees for using AI technology? For example, academia has strong positions about the use of AI with students. How should this be positioned in an organizational environment? So that's a great question. How are you seeing organizations put the proper sort of guardrails or parameters in place for how they view AI and how it should or shouldn't be used in their organizations?
Yeah, I'd love to see every organization that's leveraging artificial intelligence have some page on their website that talks about their principles and their values. In terms of preparing employees for using AI technology, one thing that I think organizations are going to need is to build trust with employees, especially if employees are in roles where they feel like the use of artificial intelligence could eventually replace their job. That is a risk for people. And it's not just a risk for people in certain industries. It is a risk broadly across the board, I think, for individuals, for people who are working in technology companies and for people who are working in fast food restaurants. AI is finding its way into every industry. So I think building trust is going to be really important. I think being transparent about the uses of artificial intelligence, if you're bringing AI into your organization and the hope is that it can reduce the workforce, then you need to be transparent about that off the top. And I know that organizations don't want to do that because they don't want to spook people, but it's definitely better to be transparent with people and let them know so that they can start dusting off their resume, so that they can start reaching out and maybe moving to different organizations if your plan is to reduce your workforce by bringing in artificial intelligence. I think that that's something that organizations can do. I think also talking to people about the use of AI in their day-to-day job and where it is okay to use AI and where it may not be okay to use AI. In my job at GitHub, I do not use ChatGPT to help me craft my messaging and positioning documentation for a specific feature or product. And part of that is because I don't want to hand over information that is private to GitHub and just put it out there willy-nilly on ChatGPT. I don't want to do that. And so if they're going to be using artificial intelligence, making sure that that the tools that they're using are authorized and that they know that those tools are authorized and that they understand sort of the red, yellow, green of when they can and can't and should and shouldn't use the AI.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And I think it would be good if every organization had those policies outlined for sure. And this is from Darian on LinkedIn. Darian says, how can we ensure that AI development is inclusive and promotes fairness across diverse populations?
Yeah, this is a really good question. Ensure is a really strong word. It's a high bar, and it's a word I want to use. But almost 10 years in the world of responsible AI tells me that ensure is a really high bar. But I do think that we can be intentional about AI development. And I do think that we can be considering how to make sure that it is inclusive and continue to iterate on that. I think part of the reason that the idea of responsible AI or fair AI or inclusive AI scares some companies is because they think we have to get it right out of the gate. When I think that a lot more organizations who are building and using AI could come out of the gate and say, hey, we're starting here, but we're continually, this is where responsible AI comes in and governance processes, but we are continually evaluating the use and of this technology or how we're building this technology so that we can make it more inclusive, so that we can promote more fairness. And I also think when we talk about sort of fairness across diverse populations, I think that every organization could afford to invest more in this in particular, making sure that whatever they build or whatever they're using or deploying out into the world is promoting that fairness, and that it is a journey.
Yeah. So those were some of the best clips and some of the best featured AI discussions from the interviews that we've done on the topic of AI on this podcast. I'd love to hear from the audience here. What are your favorites? What are some of the topics or speakers that you love the most, or the guests that you love the most as it relates to AI? And if there's any other topics you'd like us to cover, whether it's related to AI or digital transformation in general, love to hear your feedbacks in the comments below. So wherever you're listening or watching, please drop those in the chat or the comments below. But thank you, Darian. Thanks for putting together that list. That was a great curation of some of the great interviews we've had throughout the year.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to see how much more we learn about AI and how much it changes in 2025, and the guests that come on and tell us all about everything that's going on.
Yeah, me too. I'll be curious to see where the AI world takes us, as well as digital transformation in general too. And we'll have a similar episode to this where we take the best of the top interviews across all topics. So we're going to do another one of these toward the closer to the end of the year. We'll do another one where we kind of count down some of the top interviews that we've done. So stick around for that as well. But be curious to see how the world of AI evolves here. And appreciate you all being here today. I hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next week, which will be our 200th episode. So be sure to join us for that. Episode 200 will be next week. Every Wednesday, you can find new episodes at transformationgroundcontrol.com. Show is produced by Major Tom Productions, sponsored by Third Stage Consulting. If you'd like to learn more about Third Stage and what we do, please go to thirdstage-consulting.com. We're an independent and tech agnostic consulting firm that can help you and your team through your digital transformation journey. So check us out at thirdstage-consulting.com. You can also reach out to me directly if you'd like to learn more or chat with us about our services. So I hope you're having a great week. We'll look forward to seeing you next week on Transformation Ground Control. Take care.